Hello and welcome to The Recovery. I'm Michael DePetta, as always, alongside me, Angus Craig. Angus, how are we?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Not bad at all, Angus. Today we've got a very special edition of The Recovery coming in on Thursday morning instead of Monday because we are launching the new media hub here at Trobe University. Pretty exciting time for all the kids.
It's very exciting. Yeah, it's very nice in here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's looking pretty good. First up, we're just going to run the news headlines, as always, with Angus.
Hurricane Irma has roared into the Caribbean and is potentially heading towards the United States. The hurricane is roughly the size of Tasmania and is battering through the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico with record-setting force.
Following the nuclear standoff in South Korea, Malcolm Turnbull has said that he is considering plans to evacuate Australians from the Korean Peninsula. He has urged Australians in the region to register their details.
6 fuel tankers have exploded in a blaze and sent gas cylinders flying into cars and neighbouring properties on High Street in Drysdale. Nearby homes were evacuated and it took firefighters several hours to control the fire.
In sports, Rafael Nadal has stormed into the US Open semi-final after dispatching young Russian Andrei Rublev in straight sets. Nadal now waits to whether he will face the all-too-familiar Roger Federer, should he defeat Argentine crowd favourite Juan Martín del Potro.
Star players Rory Sloane and Steve Johnson will both miss the blockbuster clash between Adelaide and GWS tonight, with the latter seemingly dropped due to lack of form despite his undeniable finals experience. Sloane failed to pass a fitness test after a battle with appendicitis, but is expected to play in Adelaide's next fixture. And that's all the news for now.
Well, this week we didn't have any footy to talk about, but we did have a multitude of other sports, starting off with the Socceroos, who played in the crucial World Cup qualifier, had to beat Thailand by a few goals to put the pressure on Saudi Arabia and didn't quite manage it, did they, Angus?
No, they were very disappointing. So we lost to Japan in the first game, which really put us under the pump, and we absolutely dominated this game. I mean, we had 45 scoring shots, but to only win 2-1 was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, look, Japan, the loss really did set us back. It's been a pretty underwhelming campaign overall. Too many draws for Ange Postecoglou. He's not playing the kind of football that will win you World Cups, and Japan really took advantage of us in that previous fixture. So that left us with a scenario where, coming in to face Thailand, one of the minnows of the group, we were really expected to, put 3 or 4 goals past them and potentially give Saudi Arabia something to think about. Very lovely strike there. When you're conceding goals like that, you don't really have much of a chance.
Yeah, it was Saudi Arabia's 1-0 win over Japan that denied us direct qualification, and now we have to go down the arduous playoff route to move forward.
Yeah, so really, all too many problems for the Socceroos have been. We had plenty of chances, but it's at the other end really that was most concerning. Thailand actually got around the back a couple of times. Even if you're getting this many shots at goal, see us hitting the post there a couple of times in the early going, but to concede the goal at all was really our downfall. I mean, we had plenty of scoring shots. We dominated the game. We had a crack, but we just couldn't make it tell.
Yeah, we needed to score 4 or 5 goals against Thailand, and the Saudis would have needed to score 2 or 3 goals against Japan to reach Russia. So we had to win by a fair way.
It's a fantastic goal here. That's the value of Aaron Moy. If you had a couple more of him out there, maybe Australia would have stuck a couple more through.
Yeah, definitely.
But this is where it all goes wrong. They've walked that in, really, Thailand, around the back of the defence that, in the World Cup, defending like that's going to see you fall pretty hard.
Yeah.
Good attack down the wing there, and, to be honest, not a lot the keeper can do. He's let down by his back 3 in that occasion. Australia did hit back very quickly afterwards, but yeah, it's probably too little, too late in terms of scoring, and now we wait to see who we're playing from the Americas region. Leaving us all we're really exposed, I would say. I mean, in terms of World Cup qualification, last year last time round we made it a little bit more convincing, and Ange is now under the cosh. Moving on to the AFLW State of Origin fixture, really resounding victory for the Vics. I think a lot of people expected that. Angus, how'd you see this one?
Yeah, massive victory for Victoria. It was 94 points, I believe. They were on top all night. It was a very impressive game. They were saying on the off season that the skills have lifted and the fitness has lifted, and the grade's going to go to a new level. And we saw a bit of that on Showcase on the night. It was a pretty impressive win.
Good to see Daisy Pearce running around doing her thing as always. The Vic skipper, I think she had 37 disposals.
Yeah, she was terrific.
She was fantastic. She always leads from the front. Mo Hope got involved, one of the power forwards of the comp. I think Jazzy Garner kicked 5 as well for the Vics, and so when you've got potency like that up forward, it's made it pretty tough for the Allies.
Yeah, it was very tough for them. As you said, Daisy Pearce, she was fantastic. Best on by a long way. She's been terrific. She had 22 touches in the first possession, in the first half, which which by any standard is pretty impressive. A lot of guys can't do that in the AFL. So, yeah, a terrific game from her. And, yeah, great win.
What wasn't so great from an Australian point of view was the performance against Bangladesh. Never lost to them, but that record actually ended. We did lose to Bangladesh. Pretty disappointing for the Australian cricket team.
Yeah, it was very disappointing. We had a good chance there on the final day. We were looking like we might run away with it, but a very disappointing loss to Bangladesh. Just following all the pay rises as well for all the players. You know, our players are on around $1 million a year, and their highest player is about 30,000 a year. So great win by Bangladesh. They played the pitch better than we did. We struggled with the spin. Made a couple of changes coming into the next game, but yeah, I mean, congratulations to them. They played very well.
Yeah, credit to them. I mean, I guess playing on a subcontinent pitch is always difficult at times, and they made that work to their advantage, and that's
Definitely.
what the teams down there do. I mean, just because Bangladesh, you know, are considered one of the weaker test nations doesn't mean that you can take them for granted.
Yeah, I mean, if you turn up and you're off by a little bit, you can get beaten by anyone.
And that's just the way it can work sometimes. So Australia definitely have some work to do, but they have posted a decent first innings in the second test. Moving on to the AFL finals now, obviously the topic on everyone's lips. First game tonight of the series, Adelaide GWS. No Sloane and no Stevie J. Who's the more important loss?
Oh, I think Sloane's the biggest loss. He's been close to their best player this season, but probably Matt Crouch. I think he's a big loss. Stevie J, it surprises me that he's still out, even though Devon Smith's out as well.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that one. I mean, the whole purpose of the recruiting Stevie J was that it will give the Giants a bit of X factor and know-how come September. If he's fit, I think he's a guy who can turn up in a third quarter and turn a game for you.
So he's gone out for Matt DeBall, which does surprise me for the in. But look, it's going to be a great game tonight. I think I'm actually going to back the Giants in for this one. I think they're just hitting their straps.
I agree with you. I think I'm going to put GWS down to win this one, but I think Adelaide will bounce back the week after.
The next game tomorrow night, we have Richmond-Geelong, who we saw in a pretty tight contest earlier this year down at Simmons. Geelong got the cake, but it's going to be a different story at the G.
I think this is probably the most talked about of the four fixtures this week. Everybody's talking about Tigerland back in the finals, back in the top 4 position for the first time in a long time. 95,000 plus expected at the G. It's going to be a battle of Dustin Martin versus Paddy Dangerfield. Do you think if one of them fires, it's going to make their team win?
Yeah, well, obviously we've seen Dangerfield can single-handedly win games. He did it against Hawthorn at the G not that long ago in a very big game and close game as well. I think it's going to come down to Richmond's sort of B and C grade players. They're small forwards, very small forward line. If it's going to be wet tonight, then it's certainly going to favour the Tigers, I think, with their small forwards. But it'll be whoever hands the big stage. I mean, Damon Hardwick's coached the most games with no finals win, so there's a lot of pressure on the Tigers. I mean, they do have a second chance, and knowing them, they're probably going to win this now that they have their second chance. But I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, for mine, the Tigers do need to win tonight in order to keep their September dreams alive. I don't think that they're going to knock off a Sydney team if they have to play them at the G. The elimination final, Sydney versus Essendon. Last time they played at the SCG, Essendon gave them a red-hot run for their money and should have won the game. Yeah. But with Lance Franklin playing the way he is at the moment, he's been arguably the best player in the comp over the last month. Do you give the Bombers a chance?
I think if there's anyone in the bottom 4 of the 8 that can beat the Swans, I think it's probably going to be Essendon. I mean, they're capable of some very good footy, but they're also capable of some very poor footy when they've lost to Brisbane. But I like the way they play, and I think that they, if anyone can knock the Swans off, I think it's probably going to be them. They haven't really got a whole lot to lose.
I think September footy, a lot of the time, is about taking the game on, and Essendon definitely do that better than, say, a West Coast or maybe even a Port Adelaide away from home. Essendon are able to run quickly and score quickly and put on pressure. So I'm not really sure what's going to go on. But I guess, it's a real chance for an upset brewing. Gary Rowan, this guy was really crushing for Essendon supporters. Hopefully for them, nothing really repeats. But Sydney, this is an example of them showing that they know how to win tough.
Well, I think Sydney now, proving that they're one of the most informed sides, I think they probably actually do have a bit to lose. So it'll be interesting how they handle the pressure.
So West Coast, Port Adelaide, the other elimination final. Usually you think that the home team has the advantage, Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, but West Coast's record in South Australia is so impressive, you almost have to give them a real red-hot chance.
Yeah, I definitely say they're a chance, but one has to wonder whether they already played their final last week, or 2 weeks ago against Adelaide. Can they now take it up another level from beating the top side and beat Port? I don't think they can. I think Port are probably going to be too good. Even if they were playing away, Port Adelaide, I still think they'd win. But yeah, I mean, the way they played against Adelaide, they're impressive, West Coast. So yeah, there'll be a chance, but I can't see them winning.
Another thing that's come up, a lot of people have been talking about, if West Coast were to win, do they roll the dice on Nick Natanui the next week after?
I don't think you can. It depends whose spot he's going to be taking. I think it's probably it'll throw the team balance out of whack a bit, especially if someone loses their place.
But the star power of Nick Nat, he is such an impressive player.
He hasn't played any footy any level, has he? He's just
not this year. It's just he's an X factor on the ground. He jumps higher than everyone else. He moves better than everyone else, and he's just surely he's a bloke that you've got to be considering.
I would consider him. Obviously, I have no idea how he's been training. I'm not there, but I would be very surprised if he got a call up.
So, Angus, in summary, your 4 tips for this 4 weekend games.
I'm going to say Giants tonight by probably about 20 points.
Yep.
I'm going to go Richmond tomorrow night, hopefully. I'm going to go Sydney and Port Adelaide. And yours?
Hard to disagree. I think GWS as well. I think Geelong get it done against the Tigers. I'm going to give Sydney the nod against Essendon, and West Coast are going to knock off Port for mine.
Okay.
AFL finals, not the only finals happening at the moment. We've got local league finals as well in the EFL and NFL. We've got Tim and Jared in, as always, to talk to us. Tim, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Firstly, nice to see Gus changing his shirt for the first time on the show to another white shirt.
That is about time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, it is my dad's shirt. So.
But yeah, it's been a really exciting week in local footy, especially EFL, finals footy, and we had 3 games decided by under a goal across all 4 divisions, 2 of them knockout finals. So very impressive standard of football across the EFL. We'll start with Div 1, the qualifying final between Bowen and South Croydon. Bowen they've won 4 of the last 5 flags, so you'd expect them to get the job done, I thought, against the side in South Croydon who haven't won a Div 1 final yet. So it was pretty impressive, and it was a bit of a surprise result, I think. South Croydon came out firing early, then Bowen hit back, and it was a real arm wrestle. See Max King there. He was one of the stars of the day, kicking 3. There was some class out in the field there. I'm telling you, Bowen had 2 ex-AFL players in Tom and Jonathan Simpkin. And for South Croydon, Matty Jones was off half back. He came back from a 4-week injury, so he was back into the side, and they're coached by ex-AFL player Lee Adams. So there's a lot of good knowledge and AFL experience in that side. Coming into towards the last quarter, Baldwin were up by 3 goals at 3-quarter time. And then the star here was Jeff Goebbels. He kicked 6, all in the first 3 quarters. But then last quarter, it was all South Croydon. They came home in a wave. You see their supporters behind the fence here. They were getting up and about, and it was just so exciting. They ran over the top of them in the end to win by, it was about probably, I think, about 3 goals in the end. So they've done really well to set up a semi-final to go into the grand final, the direct route. They've got Vermont next week. So, yeah, they've really set themselves up well, and it was probably one of their biggest wins in their history, South Croydon. So it was really, really impressive, and they definitely impressed me. I didn't think they'd knock off a side like Baldwin, but they have, and it's made it tough for Baldwin now, who have to face the winner of the elimination final, which was played on Sunday, which was between Doncaster and Blackburn. And this was another terrific game. There was tight pretty much throughout the whole game. Got to half-time. They were up by, Doncaster were up by 16 points. They looked like they were probably the better side. They came out pretty well. It was actually, you see the sun out there, but it wasn't like that. It was slippery, it was wet, it was cold. It was raining for about, probably 4 hours right before the first bounce. So, yeah, it was pretty impressive. You see a good goal here from Blackburn, and it was just a real arm wrestle. As I said, 16 points up at half-time Doncaster, but then the second half, Blackburn started to get the game a bit more in their favour, leading by 4 points at 3-quarter time, and then ran away with it in the last quarter. I think they kicked 7 goals in the last quarter to win by 38 points. So Doncaster, they won, I think, 9 in a row heading into the last game of the season, and then Blackburn knocked them off, which put them into an elimination final. And then now they're going to be ruined that last round game because they're eliminated the first week after looking like they'd be getting a double chance. So
and the dirty double on them.
Yeah, they would be pretty disappointed with that. So as I said before, Blackburn now have a game against Baldwin, I should say, and then the winner of that will play the loser of Vermont and
South
Croydon. So it's pretty exciting. Now, into the other divisions, Div 2, Knox won straight through into the grand final against Doncaster East. They've been the two standout teams this year, I think, both Knox and Doncaster East. But Doncaster East will be pretty disappointed. They're up by a couple of points at half time and then fell away Knox with 7 goals in the third quarter, and they ended up winning by about 5 goals. So they'll be pretty disappointed with that, but they've got another chance this next week against Muralbach, who had a massive, an exciting win, 2 points over Lilydale in the knockout semi-final. Before the start of the game, though, Muralbach were hit with a bit of an injury scare.
I did hear about this, yeah.
Yeah, their leading goal kicker, Talevsky, who'd kicked 12 the week before, was laid out with a back injury. So they were under the gun a bit early, but they went with a 12-forward line anyway. They chucked one of their, players that is a bit of a swingman in Giorgio up forward, who was pretty impressive. And they were down by 15 points at three-quarter time, but they came home strong, which was, kind of the trend of the round, really. There was a couple of games like that, and they ended up getting up by 2 points, which was really exciting. In Division 3, just quickly, there was a game between Park Orchards and Ringwood, which was a semi-final to go straight through into the grand final. And this was an absolute cracker.
I was filthy about this one.
Absolute cracker. Park Orchards, they were down by 3 goals early in the fourth quarter and then came home strong. As I said, it's been happening all across the week in the AFL and ended up getting up by a point, which is unbelievable. They've had 3 one-point games this year and they've been on the losing end of 2 of them during the season, but they've got it done when it matters in the end of the season, I guess. So they've gone straight through to their first ever senior grand final, and I think they've been around for about 6 years. So they'll be pretty happy with that. They're a young side, and there's a lot of excitement around Park Orchards, as I'm sure you probably won't be too happy about.
No, as a Warrandyte boy, I don't like seeing Park Orchards do well. But
yeah, and then another close game by under a goal was Heathmont and Templestowe. Templestowe out in straight sets after they've been pretty good the last few years, but haven't got the job done. They've lost 2 grand finals, lost another prelim, and they're out in straight sets against Heathmont, who have come from 5th. So they're coming good. Bit of the Bulldog story, I think. They were a bit shaky towards the end of the home and away season, but they've put together a really good final series so far, and they've set up a game with Ringwood, which will be pretty impressive. I think the key to that will be stopping Trent Farmer, who's the leading goal scorer in the competition for Ringwood. He kicked 7 in a losing semi-final side. So if they can stop him, who knows what can happen. And then quickly in Division 4 was a prelim final, Forest Hill against Whitehorse, and Forest Hill were well too strong. They won by about 10 goals, and they've got a grand final now this week with Don Vale, which will be pretty exciting. Don Vale have been the standout side in Div 4, so they're going to be very hard to beat. But I think Forest Hill are probably the side that can maybe match them out of anyone. I think if Whitehorse got through, it would have been a bit of a disappointing show in the grand final. I think they lost by about 100 points when they played Don Vale during the year. So I think it's definitely probably the best 2 sides in Div 4, but Don Vale, they're going to be very hard to beat. So it's a pretty exciting week in the EFL, and I'm sure there's going to be some more terrific games as the final series continues.
Well, mate, if it's anything like this week, you might be in for a couple more 1- and 2-pointers, which will keep you on your toes.
I hope so.
Jared, have you had any of the similar excitement over at the NFL way?
Yeah, we did have a fair bit of excitement in the first week of Div 1 and Div 2 finals. So I'll start off Bundoora and Northcote Park. Northcote Park really boosted it. On Thursday, they brought in Ash Close, who's spent the last month or so with Collingwood's VFL side. And Bundoora got up pretty early, but Northcote Park were able to run away in the second and third quarter. They got 37 points up at one point. And in the last quarter, Bundoora almost completed the comeback. I think they kicked 6 goals straight, and they were at one point they were just 6 points down and had 4 shots at goal in the last quarter to win the game. And you'll see here a ball came over the top, and I think it was Ricky Dyson who might have missed one, or this might have been a goal in the second quarter. But yeah, it was a really exciting game that Bundoora had so many chances to win. They kicked 8 goals, 14 for the day, so inaccuracy just really cost them. You see Ricky Dyson here lining up in the fourth quarter from outside 50 and hit the post.
Oh.
And then just a couple of moments later, we'll see Josh Grabowski rove the ball inside forward 50 and snaps at goal. And you'll never guess what happened. He snaps and hits the exact same post. So that post, one of the most talked about posts at Preston City Oval over the weekend. We had an incident in the under-19s game as well the next day, which cost Northcote Park a win. So that was a really interesting game. Only 2 points in Northcote Park. We'll go and play McLeod next week. In the next game, the elimination final was Greensborough who got up. over West Preston. West Preston were able to kick the first two. Andrew Walker and Ahmed Saad were able to get on the board really early for West Preston. Ahmed Saad, obviously the leading goal kicker in the Northern Football League.
Couple of big names there.
Definitely, and Matty Stokes and Paddy Carnese is also running around for West Preston. But it just, inaccuracy cost West Preston throughout this game. They kicked 3 goals, 13. And in an elimination final, you just can't have that. You can't have that happening when you've got such a talent-ridden forward line.
Uglier than Angus's shirt, really, isn't it?
I think it is.
It's a bit pot calling the kettle black kind of stuff there.
It was Greensborough who were able to convert their chances, kicking 9 goals, 8 to storm away with a 31-point win, and they'll face Bundoora in the semi-final next week. Moving on to Division 2, one of the teams we love to talk about here on the recovery, North Heidelberg. We see Boomer running around every week. They were able to book their spot in the grand final in 2 weeks' time with a 70-point win over the second-place Diamond Creek. So their nearest challenger on the ladder just disposed of them by 70 points, beat them in the final round of the regular season as well.
How was Boomer pull up after the Legends game, do you know?
He was very good. You'll see a bit of a run here in the fourth quarter. He had a couple of these runs and he had a good run around on Friday night, but then came out on Saturday and just kind of tore the game to shreds. Got a couple of shepherds from his teammates here and just took the ball from half-back all the way down. Just get off
we've seen this a
Dusty
few times.
Martin. And you think this, if Boomer's playing AFL right now, he'd probably kick this goal. He decided to handball over the top and got it smothered, so it didn't finish the way we wanted it to, but him and his brother Shane kicked 4 goals each on the day, so they're going to be hard to beat this year, and Diamond Creek will now face Lower Plenty, who defeated Fitzroy by 53 points in Lionel Proctor's final match for the Stars after 10 years. He played a couple of games for Richmond in the late 90s and early 2000s, and has been a really great player for Fitzroy, one of the clubs that they have a lot to do with the Indigenous community around their area, and him, he's been the poster boy for that club, and he's been able to play with his son and his nephew for the last couple of years, but he's called time and a great career. And finally, in Division 3, we've got South Morang, who defeated Epping after losing to Banyule last week. They'll face the Bears in the grand final next week after this win. It was a really interesting game. We didn't know how South Morang were going to come out. They've had a tendency in the last couple of years to get to a prelim after being in the top couple of sides on the ladder and failing at the last hurdle. So it was, I think Epping kind of went into this game with the thought of we could probably roll South Morang, who were the minor premiers, but they just weren't good enough on the day. South Morang were a bit inaccurate, kicking 8 goals, 14. But they were able to defeat Epping by 8 points.
Do you think maybe a little bit of complacency on Epping's behalf?
I think there might have been. I don't really know. I think they might have gone into the game thinking, look, these guys aren't great when it comes to a prelim final of the finals intensity. So, and we saw that last week. They were defeated by Banyule. So I think they might have gone in with a bit too much confidence, and South Morang just ran away with that game. It'll be an interesting game on Saturday.
Well, looks like you boys are going to have plenty to talk to us about on Monday next week. Big games coming up in the EFL and NFL. If you've got any fans out there who want to talk to us about it, tweet at the Recovery LTU. Thank you very much, Jared, for your time as always, and you, Tim. Look forward to hearing from you boys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Coming up after the break, we're talking with a very special guest, Dr. Merryn Sherwood of the Trobe University, the sports journalism coordinator here. We're just going to have a chat about the new media hub and sports journalism as a whole with students in the foreground. That's all after the break. Welcome back to the Recovery. Angus, take it away.
So we're back here with sports journalism coordinator Dr. Merryn Sherwood. How are you going?
Good, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me in.
No worries. So you've been around the media for a while. You covered the Vancouver 2010 Winter Games, the Singapore Youth Games, Delhi, the Australian Open. What's been the most exciting time for you?
Well, as a sports journalist, I think covering those major events was pretty exciting. growing up watching those big kind of sporting events on television, they're the things that you really want to get to. So I was lucky enough to go to the London Olympics, which was, one of the biggest sporting events in the world, and that was pretty amazing. I was also lucky enough there that I actually worked for the International Federation, which is has some pretty sweet perks because I got passes to actually go and see a lot of other sporting events. Like saw the US Dream Team play, which was pretty amazing. Like being able to watch LeBron and Kobe and other guys, on court in Olympics was pretty cool. So I've been lucky enough to have some pretty good experiences in sport journalism. But this is probably also going to sound a little bit silly, but I also actually really now enjoy being in the classroom with you guys and teaching the next generation and seeing you graduate and go out there and actually get roles and do what you really want to do in the industry. Like that's actually really exciting to me now.
So in terms of your role at La Trobe as a sports journalism coordinator, how exciting for you is the fact that we've been able to launch this new media hub? What does that mean for students?
Well, I think it's great because I think in sport, it's one of the areas that is still really growing, and sports broadcasting is still a really important part of how we view and engage with sport. So the fact that you guys can come in here and get a lot of experience, using the microphones, using the setups, actually get that experience. There's lots of guys in the back room too getting all that producing experience. I think that that's a really important part. I don't know, what do you guys think? Have you enjoyed this semester working on the shows?
Yeah.
It's been fantastic just to be able to actually practice some of the skills that we've learned and get a bit of camaraderie on set and, work with the guys. It's been really fantastic, I think.
Yeah.
Just a bit more comfortable in front of camera as well for a few shows.
I think so too. The fact is, having it here, we're looking out in the Agora where people can stand in front of you and, potentially try and put you off is actually pretty good in preparing for professional broadcasting, particularly if you're out there doing live crosses in the field. You can't really control what's going to happen. So I actually think here, putting you on show a bit is increasing the pressure a bit more. So just the location of where this is actually makes it potentially a bit more stressful for you, but hopefully means when you get out there in industry, you'll be really prepared.
Yeah, I think you're right. With traditional forms of journalism, maybe like print media and things like that, slightly in regression, is alternate media like this, video broadcasting, podcasting, more important than ever?
I think so because, I think across our whole program, all the lecturers and tutors kind of agree that, we can't just teach you to be a print journalist anymore because that's pretty redundant. We need to teach you to be a multimedia journalist or be able to essentially find the right story, but then find the right platform to actually tell that story. And so being able to be skilled in a whole range of different skills, I think, is really important. I like podcasting. I think it's really exciting as well because I think it gives people a different outlet to communicate in a different form to consume it. I don't watch a lot of video. I'm a little bit older, but I like listening to stuff and I like reading stuff, so I really like that about it. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what develops in the sports space. Obviously, the major issue with podcasting at the moment is you still don't necessarily make a lot of money from it. So, it's a new exciting medium, but is that going to be the answer to solving kind of the media business model at the moment? We don't really know.
So for students studying our course and with this kind of stuff being presented, what do you think are some extracurricular things that students can do to sort of help give them a better future and a bit more possibilities?
Well, I think anything you can do to have skills across different areas is a really good thing, but I think being involved in La Trobe Live, in the broadcast or in Upstart, our online publication, is a really good thing because it gets you used to delivering things to deadline and actually being involved in the environment, whereas sometimes assignments, even though we set deadlines, you still might have a couple of weeks. If you're working in a newsroom and you have to turn around a radio story, you probably only have an hour to do it. So, being able to do these things where you really work to deadline, I think is really important. Obviously, a part of the degree too is that we do offer credit for internships. So we really encourage students to get out there, do a substantial internship, so 120 hours at one organisation where you can get some really hands-on experience and also make some contacts because that's really going to be really important in getting into the industry.
In terms of social media influencing the way that sports journalism is being reported and spread around the world, do you think it's a positive thing, the social media platforms, or do you think that in some ways it's limiting some forms of journalism?
Well, I think it's really interesting because one of the things that social media has allowed is it allows athletes to directly speak to people that before the media were kind of, if you wanted to speak to your fans, you had to speak through the media, whereas now obviously athletes can directly speak to fans. So that makes it potentially a little bit more difficult for sports journalists to kind of tell some of those stories that otherwise they might have told. And also, I think, to get close to kind of those sources that maybe they did. But I think, it opens up new opportunities to do different things in sport journalism. So social media is here. We're not going to change that. Clubs, particularly in sports organisations, are going to do more in this space. So, how can sports journalists or sports media industry actually cover sport in a different way that I think will complement or do something different to that?
So we're just sort of going on the alternative social media kind of paths. We saw in the news recently Mark Zuckerberg bid $754 million for the rights to the IPL for the next 5 years. What sort of pressure do you think this is putting on the traditional media companies with things like this?
Well, I think it's really interesting. We've obviously seen in the last few years that, these kind of digital companies or telcos in Australia, so Optus, obviously buying the EPL rights, which has potentially been
was crushing.
Yeah, well, it's I don't know if you guys actually got subscriptions to the EPL and watch it now, or is it just, I understand it's just basically, depending on where you are in Melbourne, but, obviously the internet's not reliable, but the buffering's a bit of an issue. But it's really interesting because one thing that sport has that not a lot of other content has is that it's unpredictable and it's best watched live. So it's still something that actually has a lot of value in terms of content. You can't actually script it, hopefully if it's not corrupt or fixed, then you can't fix it. It's something that always has value. So other companies are just actually cashing in on that. Obviously, media companies aren't the ones that have a lot of the money anymore. So Facebook and Google have a lot of money. Twitter has a decent amount of cash. So why wouldn't they capitalise on sport to try and bring more people to their platforms? It seems like that's the way things are going to go.
So do you think these big sort of telecommunication companies need to be included in the anti-siphoning legislation so as theoretically they can't buy out popular Australian sports and then stream it for a price?
It will be interesting to see. They have flagged changes to the anti-siphoning list in potentially the next year or so, and it will be really interesting to see what those changes are. It seems like the top sort of premium events, so, Olympics, 100 metres at the Olympics, those sort of things will be protected, like finals of Rugby World Cup or anything like that. But other sort of rounds in the Rugby World Cup or other major events, Cricket World Cup, Netball World Cup, etc., might be taken off. And I think that may be potentially because sports might make more money if they can sell them to companies that can actually broadcast them. The whole Facebook thing is interesting though because obviously they don't want to take the onus on being a publisher. They have an issue with policing fake news and what happens there. And so it'll be really interesting to see legally how Australia deals with that in terms of sport. But I think sports generally will be looking for deals that actually make them some money, particularly at the moment. It's a very competitive sport environment in Australia. We've seen ARU's got troubles, FFA's got troubles. There's a lot of organisations that are having financial issues. And so if you open it up to bring more money in through these platforms, I think sports will be for that.
I think just lastly, one of the instances I saw recently that really kind of grabbed my attention in terms of how sports media platforms are interacting with traditional platforms, the whole Dustin Martin saga. It was meant to be a live exclusive release on the footy show about where he was going to be playing his footy next year, but everybody knew 5 hours before the bounce because of Twitter that he'd re-signed with Richmond. See, I know that Twitter's a very useful thing and sometimes getting the news quickly is important, but I kind of see that as a negative. Do you see it the same way?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I guess the footy show, they would have paid Dusty and his management team a decent fee for that and having the appearance there. So I'm sure they probably still got some value out of it. I didn't actually check the ratings afterwards. I'm not sure if it actually tied into their ratings. But I think just these days it's very hard to actually keep that kind of news under wrap. And so I think in terms of breaking news exclusives, it's going to be hard to actually kind of keep that stuff under wraps. So it's where else can actually sport journalism potentially add value in the equation. I think that's what I'm really interested in.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Merryn, thank you so much for coming in and having a chat to us. Everybody here is very impressed with the new studio and you've done a fantastic job as coordinator and I can't wait to see where it goes for the next generation of students.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Alrighty, Coming up next, we're going to be talking about our burning question for the week. We're having a look at the AFL finals bye, the bye before the finals round, whether you like it or whether you don't. If you've got any opinions for us, just ask us on Twitter at the Recovery LTU. We'll be with you again after the break. Thanks, Merryn.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
right?
Welcome back to The Recovery, keeping you entertained this Thursday morning instead of Monday. We're doing our usual segment, the burning question. Angus, take it away.
So this week we're looking at the pre-finals bye, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, if you like it or not. I don't mind it. I'm going to put my opinion. I don't mind it. I feel like it separates. I mean, we look at last year's pre-final bye. The first time it ever happened, we saw how much the doggies benefited from it. They got names such as Roughhead, Wood, Liberatore, Stringer, McRae. They all came back in. And they were playing some pretty poor footy. They lost to Fremantle by 20 points in the last round and then came back and then beat the in-form West Coast. So obviously that had a huge implication for that. And yeah, West Coast lost all their form. So I can sort of see both sides of the story. What do you think?
Well, I understand where you're coming from in terms of you're getting players back is a positive for finals. People pay money. They want to see the stars play. If you get a chance to get someone back, I do understand how that appeals to a lot of people, but I think it's an overwhelming negative. A team like the Sydney Swans, they've been in great form all year. They've come off, apart from Hawthorn, they haven't lost since round 6, and now they've got to stop. Their momentum comes to a complete standstill, and they go in again next week against a team who's, they're starting on square one. They haven't got the form that took them into the finals because they've had to sit down for a week. They're cold. They're not running hot. They're not playing off instinct like they were before. And I
don't think 1 week off will have that much of a difference. From a fan's perspective, I don't mind it because it kind of feels like a separate season starting. It's like we've had a break and now it's just the best 8 that are going to be playing. So it kind of feels like a separate season that's kicking off straight away.
I couldn't stand last weekend because there was no football on. Me and my family sitting at home, we had nothing to watch. I was absolutely livid on Friday night. I had work off and everything. I was ready to sit down with a beer in hand, watch a game of finals football, and
sometimes
nothing.
The absence makes the heart grow fonder. Sometimes the week
Certainly
off
didn't
makes
make
it even
mine any
better.
fonder, Angus. I can guarantee you that.
But how much more excited are you tonight to watch the footy?
Extremely excited, but I just want to bring something into attention that you've conveniently left out. A survey taken. Before I say that, look at Twitter agreeing with me. The finals bye needs to go at the Recovery LTU. If you've got any tweets that agree with my point of view, boys, come on, keep sending them in. I remember the coaches did I think there was a survey taken by all the AFL senior coaches whether they were in favour of or against the finals bye. 2016, they did the survey, 0 out of 18 were in favour, and this year, 3 out of 18 were in favour. So if the blokes...
Well, this is on the increase. I would like to see who the 3 coaches were. I mean, if they were top 8 sides, I think it would be relevant. If it's the bottom sides who just want to watch footy, then...
I guess that does
Probably
carry a little bit of weight, but I guess the overwhelming majority is still
Yes.
with scrapping the bye. So it'll be interesting to see what Gillan McLaughlin does in terms of that and whether it sticks around for the next few years.
It'll be interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, because there was no footy last weekend, it gave us a chance to prepare and talk about a different kind of football. American football is back up after the break. We've got a bit of time to talk about this, which is good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's fine. We're happy to talk about
We
this.
were running on time.
It's hard to believe, isn't it? Who's starting?
I am.
Marshall? Okay, I'll wait a second.
All right, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
So even
Welcome back to The Recovery. Tweet us at The Recovery LTU. Talking about one of my favourite sports now, long overdue. I'm excited for it to be back. We're talking about the NFL. We've got Marshall and Nick in the studio. Boys, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you? Very good. Thanks for asking.
Very good, boys. everyone's excited. Talking about the NFL, it's such an exciting game. It's going to be a fantastic season. A lot of things have happened in the off-season. Marshall, what are you looking to talk about today?
I'll be covering the AFC, and there's three teams I really want to talk about this year. And first of all, we start off with the Super Bowl champions from last season, the Patriots. They've had an interesting off-season. They brought in a couple people in the down back, and another cornerback from Buffalo, Stephen Gilmore.
Yeah, correct.
Brought him in, and they've had a really good in the free agency. Brady. We'll talk about Brady. He's 40 years old now. Is he going to regress this year? Is he going to step back at all? That's the big question. And then in the pre-season, coming from the off-season, they had a big injury of Julian Edelman, their number one, maybe number two, depends if you think Cooks is their number one wide receiver. He tore his ACL and he'll be out for the whole season. So that's a big loss. It's 1,100 yards, 98 catches. It's going to be hard to replace for the Patriots.
Yeah, I think the loss of Edelman's a really important thing. Obviously, Brady can pick and choose his targets at will. Who do you think's most likely to replace Edelman, maybe at that wide receiver 2 slot?
It's a surprising pick for me. He did well in the Super Bowl last year, and he had a good season last year. About 60 catches. He's a running back. James White, similar stature, 5'10", 5'11", 200 pounds. He has that quickness that will be hard to match up against for a linebacker. That's my pick for who I reckon who will take over. He got 14 catches in the Super Bowl last year, 3 touchdowns. It's probably unlucky he didn't win the Super Bowl MVP with that sort of stats. But that's sort of my pick to see who will take over Edelman's spot.
So for the Raiders, Marshall Lynch has come out of retirement. How do you see his impact for the season?
I'm not overly convinced that he'll have a huge year this year. He might it might be positive for him for the fact that they're a passing offense. They pass far more than they run. He's 31, and for a running back, that's quite old. That's a very physical position. And his style of play is a power back. He tries to run over defenders.
Yeah.
And we don't know how his body's sort of holding up at this age. And coming out of retirement, it's sort of a big unknown.
Okay.
They can really drop off the cliff after the age of 30. I mean, you saw it with Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson last year.
Can really drop off a cliff. After 30, it's sort of the running back's curse once they get to that.
That's right.
We all know that Oakland just love to chuck the thing down the field. They've never really been a heavy running team. That could help him.
One thing that will help him too, he can catch the ball. So if they can get him into space and get him some free space to run, that could be a good start for him to go. To play well.
Just on the other side, Nick, who are you looking to talk about this season? Who are the teams you're looking at?
My teams to watch in the NFC, I mean, it's a tried and true sort of every year you're going to be looking at the Green Bay Packers. And Aaron Rodgers, any team with Aaron Rodgers in the fold is going to be dangerous.
He's just a beast.
He is an absolute beast. The one thing that worries me for them is they have no running backs. Eddie Lacy's gone to the Seahawks. They had Ty Montgomery running through there. Christine Michael, I think they picked up off waivers last year, then they cut. So they really have no running support, no running game at all. So it's all on Rodgers this year. They do have a healthy Jordy Nelson, 1 year removed.
How do you think Jordy will go? Obviously, he's getting older now, and at 30 again for wide receivers is a sort of can be a cliff, and so they can go downhill. How do you think he'll go?
Exactly. I think he'll be fine. As the season wore on last year, he did improve. I think he'll be back to his best. They got Martellus Bennett in at tight end, so he'll definitely have help in the passing game. He'll have plenty of weapons around or surrounding him. Just that lack of running game really that worries me.
With Nelson, he's obviously one of the smartest receivers in the game. He'll know how to get open. He knows what to do. Running back-wise, maybe not so much of a problem regular season, but come playoff times, you need to have a run game. What are Green Bay going to do to sort that out?
I'm not sure. I think they'll need to look to the waiver wire again. One team that does have that sorted is the Atlanta Falcons. They've got Devontae Freeman. They've got Tevin Coleman to back up Matt Ryan, who had a career year last year. They're my other team to watch. Them and the Cowboys, I think, they're the ones you really have to watch out for.
But no Zeke for 6 weeks.
He'll play in week 1.
Yeah, he'll play.
But the suspension, I think, has been upheld. So it's looking like he'll miss 6 games, just not the first 6 games. It's a bit strange.
Do you think that Darren McFadden's going to be able to replace him?
He will replace him,
Yeah.
whether he does a good job or not.
They have a fantastic offensive line, so it could be. You could put me at running back.
I think any one of us could run behind that, to be honest, and score a few yards.
Exactly. I think McFadden, he'll do just fine. Whether they win or not, that is a question. another question, I suppose.
Well, I guess come Monday morning, we'll have a couple of games to talk about. The season kicks off this Friday. Kansas City versus New England, absolute blockbuster clash. Sadly enough, that's all we've got time for. A short show this week. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Marshall. We look forward to getting you back on to talk some NFL.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we'll be back to the regular time Monday morning next week for The Recovery. Hit us up on Twitter @TheRecoveryLTU. From me and Angus, it's bye for now.
See ya.